In 2013, Ma Thorne, a veteran wildlife rehabilitator, lived in a silence that was less peaceful retreat and more persistent ache. Her sprawling farmhouse, nestled deep within the fringe of the Willamette National Forest in Oregon, was a sanctuary for injured raptors and orphaned fawns. But it was also a fortress, built around a broken heart. It had been 5 long, stretching years since her husband David, a man whose laughter was louder than any bird call, had succumbed to cancer. His absence was a physical void, leaving Ma at 57, adrift with nurturing instincts that had nowhere to fully land. Her work was her anchor, but the solitude felt heavy, a constant pressure beneath her ribs. She was meticulous, professional, and rigid in her protocols, a necessity when dealing with wild creatures. She believed strongly in non-imprinting. Her goal was always return to the wild. This dedication was especially important to her, because it honored David's memory. They had always agreed that true respect for nature meant keeping a safe distance. One crisp October morning, the calm was disrupted by the shrill jangle of the old rotary phone. It was Sarah Jenkins, from the Cascade Wildlife Rescue, a facility an hour's drive east. Sarah's voice crackled with professional urgency. "Ma, we need you. It's a bobcat cub, female, maybe 6 weeks. Found near a harsh logging site. No mother, severely dehydrated, but she's clinging on. We're swamped with elk recovery. We need a short-term intensive foster. Just a few weeks, Ma. Get her strong enough for a transfer to a specialist sanctuary. Please." Ma's gut twisted. A bobcat, an apex predator. This wasn't a disoriented beaver. This required a level of professional detachment she was afraid she no longer possessed. "Sarah, you know my stance," Ma insisted, running a hand over the silver streaks in her auburn hair. "Apex predators are always release candidates. I cannot risk imprinting. I won't create a creature unfit for the wild." "I know, Ma," Sarah's tone softened, turning persuasive. "But she's barely 6 weeks, blind in one eye from a puncture wound, and critical. She needs quiet, dedicated one-on-one nursing, the kind only you can provide. Her release potential is already near 0 because of the eye. Just come and meet her. Let your instincts guide you." The mention of the injury, the vulnerability, was the wedge Sarah needed. Ma sighed, conceding. "All right, I'll come get her." The drive felt like a pilgrimage. Ma rehearsed the protocols in her head. Gloves, minimal eye contact, set masking, routine. Discipline was the only thing standing between temporary care and emotional ruin. At the rescue center, the air was thick with the scent of pine shavings and disinfectant. Sarah led her to a quiet observation room, where the cub, no bigger than a kitten, lay huddled in a box. Her spotted coat seemed fragile under the harsh fluorescent lights. Sarah whispered, "We call her Lily for now, but she's mostly a bug. She just curls up tight." Ma knelt down, her resolve tightening like a fist. But when the cub stirred, her heart lurched. One eye was cloudy and wounded. The other, fully open, was not the fierce predatory yellow she expected, but a warm, deep amber. It was wide, unguarded, and deeply searching. As Sarah gently lifted the cub for a quick check, Bug's good eye locked onto Ma's face. In that gaze, Ma felt not the feral suspicion of the wild, but a profound, almost human vulnerability. For a split second, the world fell away, and she wasn't seeing a bobcat. She was seeing a lost soul. Ma returned home with Bug, setting up a secure, meticulously prepared enclosure in her sunroom. The first week was pure survival medicine. Bottle feedings were every 4 hours. Bug was fragile, her breathing shallow, but she clung to life with a quiet tenacity. Ma wore thick leather gloves and maintained a low, neutral voice, adhering to every rule she had preached for decades. But Bug was a persistent anarchist. During feedings, she would often interrupt the rhythm, stopping her suckling, just to fix that single amber eye on Ma's face. It wasn't the wary assessment of a predator. It was deep, quiet recognition. The breaking point arrived on the 7th night. Exhausted and worried, Ma was sitting on the floor after a late-night feeding, rocking slightly. She lifted Bug to return her to the heated nest when the cub did the unthinkable. With a burst of surprising strength, Bug pushed her tiny, padded front paws against Ma's chest, anchoring herself. She tilted her head, pressing the soft fur beneath her good ear, directly into Ma's shoulder. Then the silence was broken by a deep, rumbling purr that vibrated through Ma's thin cotton shirt. It wasn't a hug in the human sense, but a fierce, primal declaration of trust. A fragile, tiny bobcat embrace. She remembered a night 5 years ago, standing in David's empty spot by the window, wearing his old flannel work shirt. The overwhelming emotion Bug triggered was the same, but inverted. The desolate pain of loss replaced by an agonizing, soaring rush of unconditional connection. The professional detachment shattered into glittering, sharp pieces. "Oh, Bug," Ma whispered, tears finally falling onto the soft spotted fur. "You have ruined us both." From that moment, the narrative of their lives was irrevocably altered. Ma still maintained boundaries, but the emotional wall was gone. Bug's affection became routine. Every feeding, every enclosure cleaning, every quiet moment was punctuated by the gentle press of paws, the head nuzzle, the grounding purr. Bug was the living, wild embodiment of the comfort Ma had lost. The time came to talk to Sarah. "I need to confess, Sarah," Ma admitted over the phone. "The release is not an option. She's imprinted, but not just that. She has a deep need for contact. And I need her, Sarah. I need her more than I need my solitude." Sarah understood. "I saw the potential. But Ma Bobcat, this is a federal issue. You're looking at a mountain of permits, inspections, and fortress-level construction." The next year was a bureaucratic war, waged by a lonely woman with a powerful sense of purpose. Ma liquidated investments and savings. She hired specialized contractors to build a monumental, double-walled, secure outdoor enclosure that was 40 feet long, replete with climbing trees, a filtered stream, and heated den boxes. The biggest hurdle was Inspector Harrison, a skeptical, clipboard-wielding official from the state's Animal Control Office. He visited twice a month, citing every minute infraction. "Mrs. Thorne," he'd sigh, "this is a lynx rufus. It requires a degree of wildness. Your relationship is compromising its integrity." During one particularly stressful inspection, Bug provided the ultimate testimony. As Harrison was detailing required wire gauge changes, Ma sat on a rock, utterly defeated. Bug, fully grown now, ambled over. She stood on her hind legs, wrapped her massive front paws around Ma's waist, and rested her head against Ma's hip with a soft morale. Harrison simply lowered his clipboard. He wasn't looking at a compromised wildcat. He was witnessing an anomaly. He left that day with the final papers signed. Bug's affection was her own permit. Bug's presence not only healed Ma, but slowly extended outward. Ma's neighbor, Eleanor, a sharp-tongued retired librarian, was the first convert. After witnessing Bug's embrace, Eleanor's initial shock turned to fascinated acceptance. She began sitting by the fence, and Bug eventually included her in the circle of trust, pressing a paw gently against the mesh. During Eleanor's visits, a soft, sustained greeting. The healing power reached its peak with Leo Henderson, the sensitive 10-year-old, whose parents' bitter divorce had left him withdrawn and anxious. Leo's father, a gruff logger, brought him by, skeptical of the whole hugging cat story. Leo, paralyzed by shyness, could only stand 50 feet back. Bug, however, immediately perceived his distress. She walked to the center of the enclosure, lay down, exposed her white belly, and gave a low, trusting chuff. Leo slowly approached. Bug extended a paw, placing it gently on the ground near the wire. A silent invitation. Leo, his hands trembling, placed his small hand near the bear's paw. Bug didn't move. The true breakthrough came when Leo's father, witnessing the silent exchange, started to cry, realizing his son's pain. Bug's silent, non-judgmental comfort created a space for the human family's grief. Leo's father, humbled, finally reconciled with his son by the fence of a bobcat sanctuary. The ultimate test of their commitment came a few years later. A group of local teenagers, motivated by boredom and spite, attempted to breach Bug's outer enclosure fence one dark night. Ma, roused by the external alarm, rushed out. The situation was dangerous. As the vandals began rattling the wire, Bug, now a large, imposing female, did not flee. Instead, she let out a low, guttural, wild snarl, a sound Ma had rarely heard. She positioned herself directly between the threat and the inner gate. Bug was protecting her home and her Ma. Ma, in turn, found the strength to confront the trespassers, realizing that her protector was the wild heart she had saved. The incident cemented their bond. Bug chose affection, but she was wild, and she was fiercely loyal. Years passed. Bug grew into a magnificent creature, sleek and powerful, famous locally as the hugging bobcat of Willamette. Ma, now in her late 60s, found her life filled not with the sharp edges of grief, but with the warm, deep purpose Bug provided. The bobcat forced her to be present, to be strong, and to remain vulnerable. One golden afternoon, Ma sat on her porch swing, watching Bug sunbathe. Bug rose, stretched languidly, and ambled over to the fence closest to Ma. Watching her Ma with that familiar warm amber gaze, Ma reflected on the paradox. She had set out to save a wild creature, but the creature had saved her, not by returning her to the wild, but by reminding her that connection, even the most unlikely form of affection, was the true core of existence. Bug stood on her hind legs, pressed her paws to the wire, and rested her head. A silent, unwavering hug. In that profound, quiet embrace, surrounded by the wilderness she loved, and the wild creature who chose her, Ma Thorne knew her own wild, wounded soul had finally completely healed.